We're going to go through each Premier League club, and we're going to be looking at the goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards. And I'll give each club a score out of 10. 1 being terrible assets, avoid, stay away, stay clear, and 10 being fantastic choices, plenty of choices, probably even triple up on this team. So, of course, we're going to start first with Arsenal. So last year when Ramsdale joined Arsenal, he was absolutely incredible. Most people will bring him in. He's in at 5 million this year, but I'm not going to be suggesting getting Ramsdale in for your side. We all know goalkeepers, the expensive top tier goalkeepers like Edison and Alisson are now 5.5 million. You've got Mendy at Chelsea at 5 million, and then you've got a bunch of 4.5s. Ramsdale's at 5 million. You've got to think to yourself, do I want the Arsenal goalkeeper, the Chelsea goalkeeper? You might also, when we get to the defenders, be looking at a 4.5 billion Arsenal defender. So I'm not going to be suggesting any Arsenal goalkeepers. For the defenders, now Arsenal are right near the top for fixture tickers. We need to remember as well that there's a high chance that you're going to play your wild card within the first 10 weeks because during the winter time it is the World Cup, and we're going to get sort of a winter wild card where you get unlimited transfers. So you need to use your first wild card before we get there, and there's no point in using it in game week 14 and then you've got another forced wild card in essence in week 16. So pretty much look at the first 8 to 10 game weeks, and in those first 8 to 10 game weeks, Arsenal's fixtures are fantastic. So this is why a lot of people will be focusing on Arsenal players, specifically a couple, maybe just one of the cheap Arsenal defenders. White at 4.5 million is looking like a popular shout, and Tomiyasu, the right back, if he can stay fit, is another player people will be looking at. But I'm just going to throw a little bit of something in there with Saliba coming back to Arsenal after a pretty successful loan period back in France, could threaten some White minutes. And you've got Hector Bellerin, who for some reason is not in FPL, but he's back as well after a successful period in Spain. He did pretty well. As much as the fixtures are looking pretty good, I'd be a little bit worried about Arsenal assets purely because there is challenges for those 4.5 million slots. If you're going to go Arsenal defense and you want to splash the extra cash, you've got Gabriel, who should be the nailed one, and of course you've got Tierney if he can stay fit. So looking at defenders, you've got choices. I personally prefer Tomiyasu because he plays in the fullback position, and I think if Bellerin's not involved, Tomiyasu is nailed. White, he's gone out and splashed a lot of cash on White, so I don't think Saliba's going to walk back in, but there is that threat there. Moving on to the midfield now. Saka was fantastic last season. I do think there's a good pool of 8 million players that we'll notice when we go through the clubs. But Saka at 8 million, with the aforementioned great fixtures that Arsenal have, I still think a good shout. 6.5 million Ødegaard is in a little bit of a grey area because you might be tempted by born-again Marcus Rashford, Alex Saint-Maximin, maybe a 6 million Bruno Guimaraes, but 6.5 million Ødegaard, if you don't want to stretch to 8 million Saka, I don't think is that terrible. But then you've got the two £6 million boys. Now, if you get this right, I've got a lot of people that think it's Martinelli who is in there over Smith Rowe, but some saying that, if he has one bad game, Smith Rowe's going to be in there. 5 substitutions are available this year, so just don't be surprised if Smith Rowe starts one, comes off after 50 minutes, and Martinelli comes on, or vice versa. Or, Martinelli's having a quiet game, he's off at 65 and Smith Rowe is on. I'm not going to recommend these for 6 million until we've seen which one is potentially more nailed than the other. And moving on to the strike force, you, of course, have new signing Gabriel Jesus, and Nketiah at 7 million now. He was the main man really towards the end of the back end of last season. He signed a new contract, but obviously Gabriel Jesus coming in, big money signing. I think he's going to be the key one. He's 8 million. It's the same price as Saka. So I personally am leaning towards Gabriel Jesus over Saka. Not necessarily in terms of opinion, but for me, it's price points. Haaland is currently my striker. He's most people's main striker. And I don't think you can go with just a one-man formation because if Pep decides to rotate, or Haaland, who has had some injuries in the past, and then you're stuck with two non-playing forwards or like a 6 million Solanke, I don't think that's a good idea. But if you've got Gabriel Jesus and something happens to Haaland, then you're all right just going up front with Gabriel Jesus for 1 or 2 game weeks or however long Haaland is rotated or injured for. Saka, there are other options in there. Also, we're not too sure about penalties. So for me, the top pick for Arsenal, I would think, is Gabriel Jesus. Second choice would likely be one of the 4.5 million defenders for value and potential rotation with Newcastle or Brighton defenders, or even Leicester defenders, if you get one of those tasty win backs nailed down. And then, of course, I'm going to recommend Saka because he's growing as a player. He is improving, but there are other players around that 8 million mark who I think could be worth more to your team. All in all, I'm going to rate Arsenal an 8 out of 10. They are a top 6 Premier League side. They will be trying to get Champions League football. Wouldn't be recommending a goalkeeper, but there's, you could choose one of the nailed defenders with the great fixtures that they have, and you're spending no more than 5 million, which I think is good value. You could get Saka, who is improving as a player, but if cheaper option, Ødegaard's definitely going to be playing behind the main striker. And then Gabriel Jesus alongside Haaland, I think, is a good fit as well. A good secondary striker, and not too expensive, who had started his Arsenal career well. He came on against, I think it was Nuremberg, and he scored, albeit I'm not going to judge too much on pre-season, but I think he's going to be the main man up front. And with it comes down to fixtures. I know you can be form and you can be fixtures, but before the season started, there isn't really any form. You got to look at the fixtures, and Arsenal fixtures look so good. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for Arsenal for me. Okay, moving on to Aston Villa. So again, Martinez, fantastic goalkeeper. For 5 million, you're going to go for Mendy, or you're going to go down to the 4.5s. You're going to go up to the 5.5s. It's in a difficult spot there, so I wouldn't be going there myself. Cash, I believe, played like every game last season. He was the best, highest point scoring defender outside of the top 4. So if you want to start solidly, Aston Villa's opening 3 games are pretty good defensively, and we know he likes to get forward. 5.5, you got Perisic. 6 million plus, that's when you've got your Liverpool, City, Chelsea defenders, which are obviously great choices, but $1 million plus more expensive. And then below 4.5 million, you've got a few to rotate. So if you're looking for that third defender out of your 4, but someone you can rely on week in, week out, if you had to, I don't think that Cash is a bad shout there. And of course, you've got the troll that is Luca Dean. They have gone to sign a left back, but it is going to be covered for Luca Dean. But he is your one that could explode. He could go out there, get free kicks, get a corner goal, an assist. But for me, just try and start a new season on a new slate, but for 5 million, you're not going to choose both of them, and that's why I'm not going to recommend Luca Dean. You just probably stick with Matty Cash. If you did want a 4.5 million though, to rotate with some of your players, because the opening 3 for Aston Villa are pretty decent defensively. If we just take another look here, Bournemouth, Everton, Palace isn't that bad from a defensive point of view. 4.5 million Mings isn't that bad, but he's not someone you want to keep for a long time, because then they've got West Ham and then a couple of difficult fixtures here, Arsenal, City, Leicester. Not ideal, but Cash is someone that you could just play week in, week out in those fixtures, and he might get you something going forward. Going into the midfield, Ramsey at 5.5 million. The reason I'm going to bring him up is there is a lot of love in the community right now for Neto at Wolves, who Wolves as a club and Neto as a player has not particularly swayed me at all, but Ramsey last season was sort of making a mockery of his 4.5 million price tag. Granted, if they're going to play with Coutinho behind the front too, it does take him away. The way that I've seen a lot of structures of clubs, if you've got 5 at the back, or you're playing 4-5-1 or 4-4-2, and you need that cheap player who is 6 million under, I don't think Ramsey is a terrible deal. Coutinho at 7 million. He's in a few drafts. I know he had some big blank patches last season, but there were sparks of that ability we know that he has, and he was going off with Brazil and scoring some bangers there as well. Now that he's got a permanent place, he's not on loan, he's not got a lot to prove. If he's playing behind the front 2 of maybe it's Watkins and Ings playing, I still think for 7 million he's not actually a bad offer. And remember, he's $1 million under the likes of Saka, Kulusevski, Maddison, Mount, and so on. So I think 7 million for what could be a great Coutinho. And again, those first 3 fixtures for Villa aren't bad. I don't think he's the worst shout. Leon Bailey has been working his way into a few drafts because he's worth 5 million, and he did return a goal in pre-season. But again, 5 million for someone who might play, or you just stick to a 4.5 million bench fodder who does get 2 points every week and plays 90 minutes. So I'm not going to be suggesting any more midfielders from Aston Villa, but we go up front. We've got a 7.5 million Watkins and 7 million Ings. Again, I mentioned earlier about Haaland not being your only striker. You know, don't go Haaland and like a 6 million and under forward, because you're setting yourself up for an issue if anything happens to Haaland, injury or rotation wise. So you've got to pair him with a buddy, and I think Watkins or Ings for their price would be decent. Again, decent opening first three, not new to the Premier League, a pretty settled Aston Villa side, so I don't think you can go too wrong with Watkins or Ings. Again, they're playing more together, they're learning more together, so get a good solid pre-season under their belts. And, you know, Coutinho, Ings, Watkins as that front three for Villa, I don't think is actually that bad whatsoever. So I'm going to give Aston Villa assets a 7 out of 10 because they're pretty well priced. They're good buddies for bigger players, and their opening three fixtures are pretty good. Here we are at Bournemouth, and I'm going to be honest, guys, I'm going to lump the promoted teams all together because I'm going to rate them all basically 3 out of 10. It sounds harsh, but every season my advice is always don't choose any players from newly promoted sides for your starting 11. So last year, a lot of people were on Tony because he did so well in the Championship. So people thought, well, Mitrovic has just absolutely smashed the goal scoring record in the Championship. So maybe for 6.5 million him. I'm just going to say a point blank no. Defensively, you know, they're stepping up to the Premier League. They're not going to keep clean sheets. So goalkeepers and defenders for me are ruled out. There's no defender that, you know, is massively out of position. I don't think there's a Nottingham Forest left back who really plays as a striker. I don't think there's been any mistakes like that, like for example Lundstrom with Sheffield United. I just can't recommend as bench fodder. I can, and we'll talk about that for Fulham, especially Pereira, who's just signed from United. But in terms of getting into your starting 11, you should not be having, especially with the more generous prices this year, you shouldn't be having any newly promoted players in your starting 11, unless you think this is the year Mitrovic finally breaks the Premier League. But, you know, this isn't a situation where it was like Tony, who hadn't had the opportunity in the Premier League. Mitrovic has been in the Premier League multiple times and not done it. Solanke has been in the Premier League and not done it. So why are they going to be any different now? So looking at Bournemouth, there isn't actually a single asset. Now, if you were looking at these midfielders like Stanislas or Cook in the middle, down at 4.5, very, very good bench fodder to stick as your second or third sub, no problem. Solanke's the cheapest starting striker, so if you want Haaland, but you are absolutely scratching to just get any forward to go next to him in your starting 11, this is the cheapest possible guy for 6 million, but I'm not recommending him or recommending you to do that. He's the cheapest sort of nailed starting forward that you're going to come across. So you've got Bournemouth. Let's go to Fulham again. 4.5 million defenders. Why are you going to choose a newly promoted defender for 4.5 million when you can go and get yourself a Villa or Arsenal defender who we've already talked about? You're just not. Why would you go relegation defender over Europe fighting defenders? You know, the whole Leicester backline is 4.5 million. So why are you going to go for Fulham? Just nothing. Absolutely nothing. 5.5 million here. Bobby De Coveri. No. There's just no one. The only player here who is currently in my side, because he's going to sit sort of second or third bench, what I was saying earlier, is Andreas Pereira, just signed from Manchester United. He's going to play the 8 role, or he's going to play the 10 role. He's probably your best sub options. Then you have Mitrovic here, 6.5 million. Again, broke all the records. You see, 2018-2019, got 134 points. He got 11 goals, 4 assists. Maybe this is a better team. Maybe he's going to take that form into the Premier League. And if you are scratching again, like I said about Solanke, if you're scratching to get some forward next to Haaland who actually plays, because you don't want to play one striker by himself, just Haaland up front, then maybe Mitrovic is the choice for you. In the promoted sides, he would be the only player that might get into a starting 11, but I'm just not sold. And the newly promoted sides are usually, it's not usually easy for them anyway, but this year just feels, especially when we look at this final club, Nottingham Forest, just no. Of course, here you can see Neco Williams just signed permanently from Liverpool. He's going to be a sub player, but for 4 million, he's probably going to be your starting 4 million defender who's going to sit on your bench. So if you are really scraping the barrel, you can't stretch that extra 4.5 million defender from an Arsenal or a Leicester or whoever, and you want to save that 0.5 million, then the Williams is probably your best defender choice from the new promoted sides. Arguably, Henderson could be your best goalkeeper choice for that because he's going to face a lot of shots to save, so he's going to get points that way. And we know when he had his loan at Sheffield United, and in general, we know he is a good goalkeeper. People were thinking last season he was going to be fighting De Gea for the starting number 1 slot at Manchester United, but just never got it. So he's gone all the way down to relegation fight in Nottingham Forest. If you're going to definitely choose a goalkeeper for some reason from one of these teams, for me, it would be Henderson. I just don't know. Callback is in a lot of people's sides as well as that 4.5 million bench player that you're never going to play. And then up front, you could argue Johnson or Owinyui. I know I've just butchered the name, but that's 6 million. But I'd rather go Solanke because he's got some Premier League experience. But that basically, these players here, Henderson, Neco Williams, Callback, Andreas Pereira, and Mitrovic would be the only promoted side players that I would possibly put in my squad. But again, that is just to sit on my bench. Moving on now to Brentford. Second season, people might be worried about second season syndrome when a newly promoted side stays in the Premier League and then the second time around things get a lot more difficult. Ericsson looks like he's on his way to Manchester United, so they could be losing that player. Brentford are in a little bit of a situation where if they don't bring in some extra talent, they could be suffering from that second season syndrome. But there is one caveat here for Brentford, and it is the fixtures. You have a look, they start at Leicester and United, which isn't ideal. But remember I said you're probably going to use that first wildcard in the first 8 to 10 game weeks. And then you can see Fulham, Everton, Palace, Leeds, Southampton. Arsenal's not going to be easy. Bournemouth, Newcastle, Brighton. So you can see on the fixture tick here, there's quite a lot of green there for the first 15 game weeks. You can see Chelsea in 12, United, Leicester. Not the easiest first 2 game weeks, but if you're looking for a rotation defender or goalkeeper with maybe someone from Brighton or West Ham, these teams rotate quite well with Brentford, so you're basically playing a defender against a newly promoted or lower Premier League side. So for that reason, Raya, I know that they might be signing another goalkeeper, so just keep your eye on pre-season, but they're both going to be 4.5 million. Whichever one looks like they're going to start, could be, if you're doing the 4.5 million 2 rotation goalkeepers, Raya I think is a good choice. Janssen had a really good season last season as well. So for 4.5 million, someone who rotates, like I said, with Brighton or West Ham or Leicester or Newcastle, these teams rotate their fixtures quite well. So Janssen would be a choice there, or Henry, the wing back, could be an option too. Going into the midfield, that's where I think that they're lacking. You can see here, Mbeumo is 6 million now. I said earlier about Solanke being that nailed-on striker for Bournemouth, but if Mbeumo keeps his place, you could be picking another starting 11 player nailed. It just depends if he keeps that position. A lot of people as well sway by Ivan Toney. Didn't do too badly. 139 points, 17 returns last season, which isn't too bad, but remember he had a lot of hype earlier in the season because of what he did in the championship the season before, but I still think 139 points, I said earlier, decent fixtures for the first sort of 15 games, 7 million. So again, if you're itching to have just one other striker, I personally would probably stretch to maybe one of the Villa Villa forwards over Toney, but he's a talisman. He is on penalties. Not too bad fixtures. Only 7 million. I think you could go. You can do a lot worse than that. But in terms of midfield, maybe De Silva, and that's only because with Ericsson gone, he's had some issues at the club. I think he had a bad injury. I think he scored in pre-season already. So if you're looking for a 4.5 million who might play, he keep him on the radar. Just watch him for pre-season and we'll see how he does. But Brentford, I'm going to give their assets 7 out of 10. I was thinking 6 because I'm worried about them as a club, but if they're still looking pretty solid in the first couple of games, which are the 2 most difficult games that they have in like the first 10 game weeks, then I'm going to say 7 out of 10 because fixtures, price, and the ability to rotate with some other teams that also have nice fixtures means that maybe one player in your squad, maybe one defender or a Toney up front might not be an awful choice there. So moving on to Brighton, and you can see defensively, this is a team that I'm interested in. They rotate pretty well with some of the sides I've talked about already. Looking at their fixtures, United away from home is not ideal. Newcastle, West Ham, Leeds, Fulham, Leicester, Bournemouth, Palace. Open in 10 game weeks, it isn't that bad, especially the open in 8 game weeks. But we know defensively, no matter who they're against, unless maybe it's Manchester City or Liverpool, you can believe that they might plot a clean sheet. So for Sanchez at 4.5 million, he rotates, or if you pair him up with Brentford's Raya, is really not a bad option there. Another option that you could make, because you're never really going to triple up on Brighton, I don't think, would be to just do the Sanchez Steele double up. You've got 8.5 million and you've definitely got a striker. If something happens to Sanchez, like another red card or an injury, you've already got the backup keeper ready to go. If you don't want to spend 4.5 and 4.5 million on two keepers. Going into the defense, Cucurella is someone you're going to keep your eye on, not because he might stay at Brighton, but he could be off to Manchester City. And if he's off to Manchester City and he gets that left back slot and João Cancelo gets a right back slot, 5 million for a Man City wing back could be out of this world. The rest of the defense, just fantastic value. 4.5 million for a team that is usually defensively very sound. Veltman is key to this defense, but you've got Dunk occasionally on free kicks. The captain, aerial threat up front, now 4.5 million. He's got a discount this year. You can see before 5 million for the last 2 seasons, back down to 4.5. Lamperty is just the one that we know he could potentially have such a high ceiling. Just things like injury and fitness is what's holding him back so far. But if he can finally break through, if he can have that breakthrough season, 4.5 million for Lamptey. So I'm going to put Dunk in there, Lamperty in there, Veltman in there, and Cucurella, even if he does stay at Brighton for 5 million, he's your attacking fullback. Sanchez as well. You can see this is going to be very bottom heavy because Brighton can play good football and they can be solidly, defensively solid. They're way up there, right near the top of the table for, expected goals conceded. Really strong at the back, well organised. It's sticking the ball in the back of the net is where they go wrong. Trossard at 6.5 million isn't the worst option, but I just think for 6.5 million and under, he's got 141 points last season. He's not done bad at all. So if you're looking for that 7 million and under position, and maybe you don't trust Rashford yet, or you don't fancy a Saint Maximin or Bruno Guimaraes with Newcastle, and you don't want to drop down to below that, to like a Neto, then I don't think he is the worst option. Apart from that, would be going near the other midfielders who are all sub 100 points. And then up front, Morpay 6.5, Welbeck, Undav is the one people are looking at. Morpay and Welbeck 6.5, again, if you're looking for a player, but I don't think they're nailed because of Undav, the new player here that they've brought in, 5.5 million. If he starts the season and you need that, and you just want to go one up front and you need the cheapest possible player who might get you some minutes to come on if Haaland gets rotated or is injured, then this could be the man for you. But overall, I'm going to give Brighton as well 7 out of 10. In fact, I'm going to give them 8 out of 10 for defense and 6 out of 10 for attack, because I think defensively you're getting almost all their players for 4.5 million in defense, and defensively they are really, really solid. So if you're looking for a 4.5 million defender to rotate, I think you can take your pick out of Lamperty, Dunk, Veltman. The good thing this year, one of the little good things this year about the 5 substitution rule is the likes of Lamperty would probably get substituted. So if Brian can hold on and not, you're looking for a 65-minute clean sheet, basically, because Lamptey will get tired or get fatigued, or they'll bring him off to take care of him. So if you've got him, you might end up with a lot of situations where he starts and then gets a clean sheet, gets taken off, and then Brighton concedes. So that could be a potential there. So I'm going to give them an overall score of 7 out of 10. Next up, we've got Chelsea, and we're going to start with Mendy, of course, 5 million. So you've got Lloris, you've got Alisson, you've got Edison for 5.5. So if you can't stretch that, you're thinking 4.5. But for 5 million, Mendy, 130 points last year. We're going to talk about Chelsea's defense in a moment, but I still think 5 million, he is so tempting. I would love to have, I think, Edison in my side, but I'm looking to have 2 Manchester City players and then have a look for the third one to see maybe, for example, Grealish. Maybe Grealish is nailed now at Man City with Jesus and Sterling leaving, that I want to jump on that. Probably not going to start the season with triple Chelsea, so I'm able to start with Mendy. I think 5 million is easily, probably makes him the most valuable the most valuable goalkeeper in FPL at the start of this season. I think he's a no-brainer. He way beats out all the 4.5 million and 5 million goalkeepers, and he's just behind, in my opinion, Edison and Alisson. So for 5 million, I think he's fantastic value and definitely want to get. Got Reece James, and you've got Ben Chilwell, the boys at the wing backs for Chelsea. 6 million now. Chilwell's looking tasty in those preseason sessions as long as he's over that injury. I'm not even against here, guys, to double up. I said I was going to talk about Chelsea's defense. They've lost Rudiger, they've lost Christensen, and that's a big issue. They do have Chalobah, they've still got Azpilicueta, they've still got Thiago Silva, who's getting older. They've got Malang Sarr at the back as well, but those aren't, I think, defenders that are going to win you titles or maybe even get you Champions League football. But they're in talks to sign Nathan Ake. They're in talks to sign Kulabi, the centre-back. I probably butchered his name as well, but, reports suggest that he's an excellent defender. He's 31. Wrong side of 30 when you're spending that kind of money, and I think they're going to put him on a 5-year deal. In terms of what he'll walk into Chelsea, he's not a 20-year-old that they're going to have to grow. He's a ready-made, good-to-go, really quality centre-back. So if you're worried about Chelsea defensively now, I completely understand. But if they do bring in Koulibaly, there's the one. He's the one. New centre-back for hopefully for Chelsea. He comes in, Nathan Ake comes in, and suddenly that defence is looking more solid. So I'm not against it because the ceiling for these two boys are so high. And we're going to look at, so I've said defensively, we're going to look at the fixtures as well. Look at that sea of green. For the first 18 game weeks, you can see we've got Liverpool at home in game week 8. You can argue Spurs in game week 2 is not easy as well. But again, first 10 game weeks, you're probably going to wild card. Everton, Spurs, not easy. Leeds, Leicester, not that easy. Southampton, they're 2 or 3s on the FDR ticker, right? So starting with 2 out of 3, so maybe Mendy and James, or even Chilwell and James and Edison in goal, I'm not going to argue against that. Thiago Silva, Azpilicueta 5 million. I think he's actually really great value if he can play. Tuchel said last year that James can play right wing back and right centre back, which put a lot of people off. So maybe Ben Chilwell, he's less owned, but he's definitely going to be playing wing back because we know that Tuchel clashed heads. He even subbed Alonso. They had some arguments. Maybe that they've cleared the air on that. But Chilwell, if he plays, is going to be the wing back. James, if he plays, could be wing back or right centre back, which might put you off in that situation. But if they strengthen their defence, then you can't argue against Chelsea that they're a Champions League side. We know the quality that James and Chilwell and Mendy have, and I think they're your 3 go-to players there. I still think Thiago Silva at 5.5 million isn't that bad, but for that price, you're not going to have Perisic and Thiago Silva, so you're probably going to go for Perisic over Thiago Silva, but I still think he's a pretty decent option. If they don't sign any players, keep your eyes on Chalobah and Azpilicueta and Malang Sarr, because they're all 5 million, and if they don't fully strengthen or re-strengthen that defense, you could be getting a Chelsea defender for 5 million here. But if that's the case and you too many ifs and buts, just go for Mendy at 5 million because he's bang on nailed. Going into the middle, Mason Mount, 8 million, 169 points last year. Not a lot of people talking about him. He did well. I think they don't talk about it because you've got Saka, who he's in that Salah kind of midfielder, right? So Saka is more like a forward than a midfielder, whereas Mason Mount is your attacking midfielder. He's kind of like Kevin De Bruyne light, right? He does get forward, but he is a central attacking or central midfielder. I don't think he's going to get rotated. I think he's improving constantly as a player. But for 8 million, you're probably only going to have one 8 million player in your side. And I think Diaz and Saka are better options. But again, good fixtures. Sterling coming in to boost the attack if he's going to play with his English teammate Mason Mount. I don't think Mount is a bad option at all if you think Chelsea are going to be stronger this year. The rest of the Chelsea midfield, if Gallagher goes somewhere on loan or if he finds himself in the Chelsea starting 11, 6 million is a good choice there, but I don't think he's going to break through here. With the signing of Sterling, it's difficult to know what this front line is going to be. Havertz is now an 8 million forward. He's still a little bit rotation wary. You've got Werner at 8 million as well. 2 players that have massively underwhelmed since joining Chelsea. Both could be rotated out. So for 8 million, if you're going to start with 2 sort of 8 million forwards or Haaland and a cheaper forward, I can't recommend these 2 players because they're not nailed. Now Havertz is getting fewer points because he's a forward instead of a midfielder, so I just can't recommend those 2 players. Broja is rumoured to potentially be joining Newcastle, so I'm not going to recommend him as a Chelsea player, but potentially could recommend him if he joins any other Premier League club, because 5.5 million easily your choice. You could go Haaland and then he could be your second choice and bench him for 5.5 million, which would be fine. Midfielders, if you've got Sterling on one wing and then you've got, I say wing, they more like play sort of three forwards with a centre, left forward and right forward. You got Havertz down the middle, Werner on one side, maybe Sterling on the other. So that puts question marks over, Barkley rarely plays. Same with Loftus-Cheek. They rotate in that middle sometimes. Hudson-Odoi as well might play wing back occasionally, which you don't want to see. Kovacic, 5 million. No. Same as Kante. They're holding midfielders. Jorginho, penalties, 6 million maybe, but not for me. And then Ziyech and Pulisic could play, but just more rotation likely, and you don't want to be spending 6 million on a player that might not play. So I'm going to give Chelsea assets an 8 out of 10. And again, that's defensively. I think the reason why it's an 8 compared to, say, Brentford, I had more options at like Brentford and Brighton, but the quality here, they've got great fixtures, but if you use one or two Chelsea players, if you go Mendy, you can even triple up. You could, it's not a 9 because there's not as many options to choose from, but the options that you do choose from Chelsea have high ceilings. So Mount could do really, really well. So could Chilwell, James, and Mendy. So I think it's an 8 out of 10, but if you choose one of those, or 2, or even 3 out of those 4 players, I think you've got a good lineup there. Okay, next up, we have Crystal Palace. 4 goalkeepers, 3 of them are 4.5. Don't know who's going to get the number 1 jersey, so I'm not going to be selecting any Crystal Palace. And then defensively, Anderson and Gueye, the 2 centre-backs, Mitchell at left-back. Right back, is Ferguson going to get more than 1 point? Would be magical for the lad who's had some really terrible injuries, but maybe Ward or Klein at right back. But again, I'm not going to be suggesting any Palace defenders because look at the fixtures. Again, first 8 to 10 game weeks, you're probably going to wild card. Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa and City are not the first 4 fixtures you want to see at the start of the season. Definitely not for a 4.5 million defender where you can just go elsewhere to get those cheap, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Brentford, Brighton, Newcastle defenders that all rotate. You're not going to choose a defender from Crystal Palace. Zaha, troll to many, beloved by some. For 7 million, he is the talisman. He's the main man. You look at his year by year, 150 last year, 136, 120, 143, 136. Overall, 7 million for a nailed-on talisman at Crystal Palace is, I think, a great option. He is a good player. If you ignore the past and all the times he's maybe trolled you, fine. But again, it's still difficult. He loves, being sometimes the bad guy, if he's one of those players that if he plays for your club, you love him, but if he doesn't play for your club, he gets under your skin. And, he could probably get under some players' skin from the likes of Arsenal, Liverpool, Villa and City in those opening 4. But am I going to pay 7 million for a player with those fixtures when, again, I could go a little bit cheaper or a little bit more expensive with better fixtures for those first 8 to 10 games? I'm probably not. And then the rest of the midfield, Easy or Etsy or Elise, the 2 young wingers, 5.5 million here, 5.5 million there. Not nailed, but exciting talents. But just like people argue, say Maximan for Newcastle, exciting doesn't get you FPL points. And I like starting the season as well with some proven FPL players. So Zaha is a proven 120 point plus a season player. We haven't seen that there. I'm not paying 5.5 million for players that might not even play. And then up front, Edouard, Mateta, Benteke, they're your 3 5.5 million forwards. They would be a good option if 1, the fixtures weren't that bad, and 2, you knew which one was going to be nailed. Edouard came over from Celtic. Mateta looks like he's the most likely nailed there. But again, centre forward wise for Palace isn't ideal. There'd just be one player I recommend from Palace for the opening 8 to 10 games. It would be Zaha. So I'm going to have to give Crystal Palace a 5 out of 10 because they might start really well. They did really well last season under Vieira. I thought they were going to potentially go down last year, but play some really good football. Maybe they need to add some additions as well because we've not seen any additions to their starting lineup. Can't really recommend any of these players, even for your bench, because I said earlier, you get a Brentford defender and a Brighton defender, and they'll rotate between your starting 11, but you're not going to get any defenders from Palace And you're not going to get any forwards from Palace. Maybe Mateta if he becomes the number one forward. 5.5 million is a good price, but ifs and buts, and you don't want to start the season with ifs and buts. So Zaha is the other one he's your proven player and he's your talisman. 4 or 5 out of 10 for Crystal Palace. Next up, we have Everton, threatened by relegation last year. Pickford at 4.5 million. Maybe if he's one of 2 4.5 million that rotates, it's not bad. Defensively, not going to recommend any of them because in terms of clean sheets and being solid at the back, that was not what Everton were last year. It was one of the key reasons they were in such danger last season. But let's have a look at the fixtures. Opening at home to Chelsea, of course, is extremely difficult. Villa, Forest, Brentford and Leeds, the other fixtures there in the opening 5 game weeks. And again, I'm not going to recommend, I don't think, any of the defenders. But if you did, maybe go for Pickford as one of your 2 4.5 million rotators. Or if you just want to spend 8.5 million on one team, get Begovic, get Pickford. That's your goalkeeper. You don't have to worry about it. And again, the opening 5 fixtures aren't that bad. Game week 1's tough, but then 2 to 5 isn't that bad. But I just can't recommend any defenders here from Everton. Going into midfield, Gray and Gordon at 5.5 million. Gordon seems to be the poster boy. They've tweeted about him being their star boy. He's now the number 10. So people might be looking towards Neto. The loss of Richarlison means loss of goals for Everton unless they strengthen it. They have signed Tarkowski, who you can see is here from Burnley. But in terms of their attack, Richarlison is a huge loss. But if Gordon's still on set pieces and you're not sold by Neto, I don't think Gordon at 5.5 million is the worst. Again, game week 1 against Chelsea isn't great, but 2 to 5, Gordon on set pieces in that sort of attacking front 3. A Calvert-Lewin who gets a full pre-season under his belt to cross to get on his head. I don't think Gordon is the worst option. Dele Alli is just someone you want to believe in him. Like the quality he's shown in his past, if he can just look at that 2015 to 2017, 2018, those first 3 seasons, what a guy, what a player. 9.5 million he used to be rated. 8.5 and 9.5 million, Dele Alli. If we can get just up to 75% of what he used to be, you know, he can still come back. He's not old. He's still got youth on his side. He's got experience. Maybe if he can just really sort himself out. 5.5 million, but that's not a start the season player. That's a wait and see. Maybe he can rekindle his career. People might argue as well he will be at 5.5 million. I said earlier about Gray. You're not going to choose all 3 of them. I think if you choose one of them, it's fine. I would rate it as Gordon number 1, Gray number 2, Iwobi number 3. And then up front, Calvert-Lewin 8 million. No idea why this guy's 8 million. You got 7.5 Wilson. You got 7.5 million Watkins. You got 7 million Ings. They're just a couple of examples. You've got 8 million Gabriel Jesus. Or you have Calvert-Lewin, who was injured most of last season in a relegation fight. He got 5 goals all season, 64 points. And for some reason, he's now ranked at 8 million. And the Richarlison transfer has nothing to do with this because Richarlison and Calvert-Lewin would have played. It's not like, oh, well, he's definitely nailed now. Richarlison's gone. No, they were both nailed. So I don't understand really why he's rated. He should be 7 million, if anything. Relegation fighting team last season, injured for most of that season. But he's 8 million, so he's a massive avoid for me on that one. Everton, I'm going to give 5 out of 10. That's purely because you could just get both goalkeepers for 8.5 million, but you probably wouldn't be happy about it. But it's these 5.5 million midfielders that if you need that 11th man in your starting 11 or a first sub, just a little bit of value there, but not great. First 5 fixtures aren't too bad. The first one is difficult. Fixture 2, 3, 4, 5 isn't that bad. So choosing one of these 5.5s is okay. Okay, moving on to Leeds. And just as we're recording this, it looks like Rafinha's, the whole summer has pretty much been moving, which is a huge loss for Leeds. And arguably, in terms of the team, an even bigger loss is Phillips has gone to Man City. So I think Leeds are in some real trouble here. Similar to what I said about Everton, Meslier at 4.5 million and Clasion as your 4 million. If you want to just double down on one team, I don't think it's the worst choice. You can see here, first 10 game weeks, there's just Chelsea in game week 3. So if there's a 4.5 million and 4 million option out there and you know you're not going to really triple up on that team throughout the season, I don't think getting these 2 boys in is the worst idea. The rest of the defense is just poor. Christensen's the new player in. 5 million. You're not going to spend 5 million on a Leeds defender. Any Leeds, even if a wing back or whatever, you just not. Don't touch Leeds defense. Only Meslier because he's a shot stopper and he gets save points, not particularly clean sheet points. Going into midfielder, I had Rafinha, 7 million. I thought he was a fantastic price. He's an amazing player, but he's not going to be at Leeds. It looks like he's off to Barcelona. So he's not, unfortunately, I think it's a loss to the Premier League, not just to Leeds United. He would have been a great shout for 7 million, really well priced. So that means you've got to look at the likes of Harrison for 6, which isn't ideal. Rodrigo sometimes, but plays up front or just behind whoever is up front in that attacking midfield role for 6 million. But again, I'm not going to be choosing any of these. Sinistera, I know from his time in the Dutch leagues when I play Football Manager, he looks like he's a like for Rafinha, but Rafinha is another level. We haven't seen enough of Sinistera to suggest he can do what Rafinha did. If he can, 6.5 million is a great offer, but new to the Premier League, so I'm not going to choose a player for 6.5 million who is new to the Premier League and playing for Leeds. Despite the fixtures, just not there for me. Go for the rest of the midfield. Adams is a new signing, the American here, Tyler Adams, but he's not a particular attacking player. Somerville at 4.5 million as bench fodder could start to get more minutes. You can see he got 126 minutes last season. With Rafinha going, potentially he could see more minutes, but again, you don't want to start the season with a maybe 4.5 million player who'll get you points, who might get 10 minutes every 5 game weeks. And then up front, Gelhardt is now up to 5.5 million. My third sub non-playing here, I've gone for Greenwood because the chances are he could get some minutes. You can see 231 minutes played. So if you're looking for a non-playing third sub who might occasionally get minutes up front, Greenwood is my choice there. But then you got Bamford at 7.5 million. He had a great season the season before last. You can see 194 points, 17 goals, 11 assists. But last season, plagued by injury. Leeds fighting for the life at the bottom of the table. They're losing Rafinha, who is the key creative player for this side. They've lost Calvin Phillips to Man City, who's sort of the heart and soul, the fighter in the middle of midfield. Who's going to supply him? Sinistera is new to the league. Harrison maybe on one side. James doesn't really have that finished product. 7.5 million. I can't recommend Bamford. The fixtures are so good. I really wanted Rafinha for these fixtures. You can see the first 10 fixtures are so good for Leeds. But I can't... Leeds for me is like a 3 out of 10, almost like a relegation side, because I can't recommend. I'm not going to recommend any of these defenders because they don't keep clean sheets. Meslier is the only starting player I can recommend because he's a good goalkeeper and he'll get you save points. Greenwood at 4.5 million as your third, maybe sometimes playing forward. I think he's the best 4.5 million forward option. But apart from that, I can't recommend anyone else. Harrison at 6 million. I think there are other choices. I'd rather get Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle at 6 million, or I'd go down to a 5.5 million at Everton or Neto, or up to a 6.5 million like Saint Maximin or Marcus Rashford. Just can't recommend any players for your starting 11 except Meslier. So it's like a 3 or 4 out of 10 for Leeds. I would describe Leicester as a mixed bag because their form over the last couple of seasons is a mixed bag. They're either really good or they're really bad. They can't defend set pieces, leaky at the back, but at times they show absolute brilliance, and some of the players in this squad are great FPL and Premier League assets. 5 million Schmeichel, you're not going to touch him. We've talked about 5 million. You're going to get Mendy for 5 million, or you're going to go down to 4.5 or up to 5.5. But their entire defense is 4.5 million. I'm not looking at the centre back. So Evans, 4.5 million. Johnny Evans, if he stays fit, I think he's the key man. He's like the best centre back I think they've gone. But it's the wing backs here. Keep your eye on pre-season. Now the issue here with Leicester is you can see it's a real mixed bag. I said 8 to 10 game weeks, you're probably going to wild card. And the problem is it's good, bad, so, okay. It's a mixed bag of fixtures. But if you rotate these with Brighton or Newcastle or Arsenal defenders, the wing backs are such good value if we can figure out who's the starter. So you've got Castagna, you've got Thomas, you've got Ricardo, and you've got Justin. Now, if you just want to nail Leicester defender, you've got Evans or you've got Fofana. They're 4.5 million Leicester central defensive partnerships. But you don't. You want the wing backs because they It's not a flat back forward. They are wing backs. They do get forward. Ricardo at 4.5 million is so good. If he can put the injuries behind him and get that right wing back slot, I think for 4 point, look, he started last season at 5.5, 6, 6. This is his 5th year, you can see in the Premier League, right? But he's usually a 5.5 to 6 million defender who's at 4.5 million because he's had bad injuries. If he can get a good, solid pre-season and he gets that full-back slot, incredible. Castagna is another player you can see. This is his 3rd season, 5.5, 5.5. Now he's got a million discount. We're looking at a 1 to 1.5 million discount on these players because they were so bad for clean sheets last year and defensively, especially off set pieces and corners. But if you can get whoever, you've got Thomas, who I think is not going to be the first choice, but then you got James Justin. Whoever is going to be both sides, the right wing back or the left wing back, it's fine. But whoever starts in a rotation with, like I said, Newcastle or Brighton or Brentford defender or Arsenal defender or whoever, if you can get whoever Leicester's wing back is, I think would be a great shout. Going into the midfield, Maddison is, I believe, statistically, the best 8 million option. So you've got Mount, you've got Saka, you've got Kulusevski, you've got Diaz. Maddison beats them all. He's talisman if he can stay fit, because sometimes he gets an injury problem or he needs a rest. But in terms of quality, his set pieces, his free kicks, his long range shots, his assist potential, fantastic. Barnes as well, here at 7 million. Again, trolled a lot of people last season, but for 7 million, the quality is there. He's getting older, stronger, better. I think starting the season, if you're looking for that lower price player, I think he's a great shout. Dewsbury Hall is up from 4.5 million, but if you want to spend that extra 0.5 for a player, you're probably going to bench a lot. Maybe he rotates with a 4.5 million defender. I think he's okay. I think he's maybe the best 5 million option that you could get. And then you go through the rest. Jamie Vardy here, 9.5 million. Tough to recommend because it is maybe his last season here, but 9.5 million. Again, here's the difference, Jamie Vardy. He scores against everyone. In fact, he's better against bigger teams. But I'm not going to recommend starting the season with Jamie Vardy, even though it doesn't matter who's against. Father Time isn't on his side. He did have a few injuries last year. He's still got 133 points. He is on discount at 9.5 million, which is the cheapest he's been since 3 seasons ago when he got 210 points. He is quality. I still think he's the number 1 choice, but with the 5 subs rule, you've got Iniacho and you've got Daka breathing down his neck. He's not someone I'd recommend. But overall, I'm going to give Leicester I'm going to give him an 8 out of 10, because even though the fixtures are mixed, defensively, whichever wingback you get, you just rotate with for that game week with a 4.5 million defender who's got an easy fixture. And then in midfield, Maddison at 8 million and Barnes at 7 million. I think their ceilings are so... Yes, they've got flaws, but their ceilings are so high. Maddison and Barnes, both of them could get you double-digit hauls and you wouldn't be surprised. And then you've got Dewsbury Hall, who's maybe your 5 million enabler, or your 12th man who sometimes comes in for your 4.5 million defender, for example. So I just think Leicester, if they can get some momentum. They've been a bit flat in recent years. Maybe there's a little bit of tension with Rodgers. Maybe he's getting itchy feet. Maybe it's a bit stale there. Maybe 1 or 2 signings to rejuvenate this side could really pick them up. But I think they've got some high ceiling potential players at Leicester City. Okay, next up, I don't really need to spend a lot of time on Liverpool. 10 out of 10. Alisson at 5.5 million if you want to save a bit of cash. You got Trent, you got Robbo, even Van Dijk. So you could go Trent and Van Dijk, or Robbo and Van Dijk, or Alisson and Trent. You can do these any way that you like. Matip at 6 is a shame, because I think him and Kanate is going to fight to see who goes next to Van Dijk, so I wouldn't be going there, or any other defenders. You've got 3 here. Salah, I don't need to talk about Salah, do I? But Luis Diaz here is my 8 million choice. Without Mane now, I think Jota sometimes down the middle, Firmino down the middle, you've got Nunes down the middle. They can all play on the wings as well, but I think Diaz has done enough to sort of suggest that he's going to be in that starting 11. So Salah on one side, Diaz on the other, and then probably Nunes or sometimes Jota or Firmino down the middle. Maybe Jota sometimes takes some of Diaz's time, so if you're a little bit worried about game time, I completely understand, but just the high ceiling of basically playing in that Mane position for 8 million, I think makes him a great option. And then up front, Diogo Jota is a no for me now. He's classed as a forward, and with the signing of Darwin Núñez. Firmino, 8 million, but again, the issue with the three forwards here is I know they've spent £100 million on Darwin. It's a lot of money. So yeah, he's probably going to play, but he's an unproven Premier League player. He's still young. He's still learning, and he's not immune to rotation. You know, Salah is nailed. Robbo is nailed. Van Dijk is nailed. Trent is nailed. Alisson is nailed. Diaz, I think, is semi-nailed. The rest, whoever gets that third slot in that front line, I think is rotation proof. So I'm not going to recommend that. Don't have to really talk too much more about Liverpool. The only issue, I think, is you are going to probably have three of them. It's which three is it going to be? Is it going to be two defenders and one midfielder? Is it going to be one goalkeeper, one defender, one midfielder? That's the only question you're really going to have to be asking yourself, I think. Manchester City is another team I don't really have to spend that much time talking about. Edison at 5.5 million. Several seasons as the Golden Glove, which means most clean sheets. Personally, love the selection at 5.5. I had him last season at 6 because him and Cancelo is your double clean sheet. So if you're looking at Cancelo, arguably people rate him just behind Trent or even on par with Trent. Probably the second best FPL asset in terms of defenders, and one of the best assets in general. Over 200 points last season, still only at 7 million. So that's like the cheapest combination for a double City clean sheet, as well as having that attacking threat that Cancelo brings. The centre-back partnerships of Laporte and Diaz, they're probably still your number one choice. I just think the value is better being like Ederson, Cancelo, and Haaland, for example, rather than sort of Diaz, Cancelo, and Haaland if you're wanting that double defence. Walker at 5 million could be interesting, but if Cucurella does go to Brighton, Cancelo maybe goes to the right side. Walker as well towards the end of last season. Last season he had some injuries, but he was losing minutes. So 5 million, whilst it looks like a very attractive price tag, is not one that necessarily starts for Manchester City. Same as Zinchenko, you don't know if he's going to play. Ake at 5 million is someone to look at just because he might join Chelsea. And if he joins Chelsea, he's going to be a starter. And that's when that 5 million price tag is going to be excellent. Really would be high up on my list of players if Ake goes to Chelsea. Kevin De Bruyne at 12 million. People argue that he's too expensive. He didn't hit 200 points last season. He's 12 million. Personally, of course, he's a quality player, but I think Salah is above him, and I think I'd probably prefer Son over De Bruyne, just because, similar to what I said about Mason Mount, he's not one of those fake forward midfielders like Salah or Saka is, for example, like those who really are in the front line. He is still a midfielder, like I said about Mason Mount. I'm not going to recommend him for 12 million. Sterling going to Chelsea for 10 million, still don't recommend him. It's when you get to whoever's in that front line for Manchester City alongside Haaland. So I'm going to put Haaland in there, really highly owned. I like it because it's spreading your price points. So my two big premiums right now is Salah in midfield and Haaland up front. That's because I'm able to jump from Haaland to any other striker. I can go to Kane, I can go to Vardy, I can go to anyone within that in one move. So instead of having two big midfielders where if I need to jump onto Haaland, it's a minimum of 2 transfers, having one expensive forward and one expensive midfielder gives me coverage in those two positions. And of course, you don't need a super expensive defender because there aren't any super expensive defenders. So going into midfield, Bernardo Silva is more like a centre mid partner for Kevin De Bruyne, but you've got your Foden, you've got your Mahrez, and you've got your Grealish. These are the ones that 2 of these 3 guys are going to be joining Haaland in that strike force. Sometimes it could be Bernardo Silva, but like I said before, he's more like a centre midfielder partnership. Sterling's gone, Jesus is gone, so it just means that you're going to have Haaland up front. People think that the new signing, who's a forward here, Alvarez at 6.5 million, could be fighting for one of the winger slots rather than going, toe-to-toe with Haaland, which is unfortunate because that means I think it's going to be something like Foden, Mahrez one side, or Grealish, Alvarez the other, or Mahrez, Alvarez one side, Grealish, Foden the other, which makes these guys a wait and see, which is why I said earlier about not having Edison, but actually starting with Cancelo, Haaland, and just 2 Manchester City assets. That's not because I don't think they're great. They're also a 10, just like Liverpool. But the reason why I'm not going to be starting with 3 Man City is I want that third asset. So if Grealish stars in preseason and he starts the Charity Shield or Community Shield, then I might jump on him before game week 1. But in the first 1 or 2 game weeks, if we see Mahrez is definitely going to be playing, or Foden's definitely the number 1 choice to go alongside Haaland, that's when I'm going to get my third one. I don't want to start the season guessing who I think Haaland's forward partners are going to be. I might wait till game week 2, even just game week 2 when they're at home to Bournemouth, see who starts in the Charity Shield, see who starts against West Ham, and then bring in my third Manchester City player. Manchester United is a little bit of a tricky one now. Before pre-season started, I think a lot of people thought that some of their assets, like Rashford at 6.5, Sancho at 7.5, Bruno at 10, Ronaldo at 10.5, were pretty enticing, but because of last year's form and behind the scenes issues, it's sort of a wait and see. But then they started, and then they played against Liverpool, albeit it wasn't exactly Manchester United's strongest 11 against Liverpool's strongest 11, but they played really well. Ten Hag seems to be putting a stamp on his side, which means those enticing players, I myself had Rashford in my team. I've had him in my draft for quite a while. 6.5 million. He was like the only forward who didn't return in that game against Liverpool. Let's just go through the team. So De Gea at 5 million. You're probably not going to go there. You're not even really going to touch any of their defense unless Malacia at 4.5 million comes in, but he could just be a deputy to Shaw. It looks like Telles could be on the way out, but they've got 3 left backs, so you're not going to start the season with that, and we don't trust Manchester United's defense. But going to midfield, the year before last, Bruno was the best player in FPL. Could he be rejuvenated and revitalize his career playing in behind at that cam role in this new system? Because it looks like it's going to be a 4-2-3-1, so he's going to be that middle central attacking midfielder. But again, similar to what I said about De Bruyne, he's not a fake forward midfielder, you know, like your Salahs or Sakas who are really in the forward. Like, he is genuinely a midfielder, but we know his quality, we know his class, and if United pick up, he could be a great asset. Then you got Sancho at 7.5 million, joined for a lot of money, a lot of hype behind the name. Didn't do it at all last season, but again, second season, new manager, new system. Played really well against Liverpool. This could be the year that he, takes that Dortmund ability to Manchester United. And at 7.5 million, it's not a huge risk. We've got maybe 1 8 million player slot in our squads, maybe even 2. So he could be that second choice. For me, Rashford, I think he'll start the season on the wing. I think it's going to be Sancho, Bruno, and Rashford as those 3 attackers. And for 6.5 million, again, low risk, high potential. He had a torrid time last season, injuries and form. But you look at the seasons before that, 174 points, 177. It's really not that bad. And then we go up front. I think that's it for midfielders, but then you go up front, you got Ronaldo at 10.5. Ronaldo and Bruno both have had a £2 million decrease. I know Ronaldo's been itching to potentially get out, but Ten Hag said he's not going anywhere. If you may be looking at, instead of having like Salah and Haaland, maybe you want to try Salah, Bruno, and Ronaldo, or, having Bruno and Ronaldo and another premium might be possible. Because they're just a little bit cheaper. For the expensive assets, I'm wait and see. But I think Sancho and Rashford here are pretty good options. And apart from Liverpool, you can see here in game week 3, they've got a good opening run of fixtures until that first wild card. So I think a 6.5 million Rashford and a 7.5 million Sancho, good options. I'm going to give Manchester United a 7 out of 10. From the northwest to the northeast, we're up to Tyneside to Newcastle, and I think they've started to invest already. Botman's come in to shore up that defense. They've also permanently signed Target. I rate the prices and the fixtures for Newcastle, and the way that they had the second half of the season under Eddie Howe, playing good football, defensively pretty solid. Definitely a team to, I think, invest in, at least with one player. So going from the back, goalkeepers is the one position I wouldn't be investing in. Pope is a new signing. Dubravka now goes to second choice, but Pope, again, at 5 million, you're going to go to Mendy, or you're going to go up to Edison or Allison, or you're going to go down to a 4.5, in my opinion. I think he's not the 5 million goalkeeper I would be choosing. Going on to their defense, 5 million for Target. He is on set pieces and corners occasionally, but For me, I'm looking at those 4.5 million players. So if you want to stretch for 5, I think Trippier's the choice because he's got free kicks and we know he's got a good free kick on him. But the thing with Newcastle defensive assets is I'm interested in their rotation. If we look at their opening fixtures, again, first 10 game weeks up until you use that first wild card, you've got City in game week 3 and Liverpool in game week 5. But the other fixtures, opening day against Forest, they've got some really good fixtures. You can see Fulham in 9, Brentford, Bournemouth. They're playing like the promoted teams and not particularly offensive or attacking high threat teams. Wolves were pretty poor attacking last season. Brighton are great defensively but poor in attacking sense. So in terms of rotation with defenders from Arsenal, Brentford, Brighton and Villa, these defenders rotate really well. So let's say you're going to play 4 at the back and your 4th defenders are 4.5 million. 1 week you can have the Newcastle defender at 4.5 and then switch him out to the Arsenal defender. So I like Newcastle's defense. So I'm going to put Botman, the new star centre back, in there. And I will put Trippier in there. I have had him in my draft, but for 5 million, these are defenders that you don't mind rotating, and for some reason, maybe it's just me, I don't like the idea of benching a 5 million defender. But if you can afford it, if your budget stretches to that, he's, in my opinion, the best one to choose, but he's 0.5 million more expensive. So I like them because the fixtures are great, and when the fixtures are tough against City and Liverpool, that's when you rotate them out to another team who have good fixtures. Going into their midfield, so you've got Alan Saint-Maximin, who is in my current draft at the moment, 6.5 million, back into being a midfielder. An issue some people might have with him is they'll say he's all fart, no poo, but he is a key player. He is definitely one of their top players that they've got. He's well loved at the club by the fans and by the club itself. You could see with now having 5 subs, his fitness isn't the best, so you could see some 70 to 80 minute plus subs for him. I think now he's back in midfield. He did well, 116 points last season. He's 6.5. So if you don't want to maybe take the risk on Rashford, who hasn't been in the greatest of form, 6.5 Saint-Maximin, he's absolutely nailed at Newcastle, and he's exciting. You watch, I know that's not great in terms of FPL advice, but just in general, to have him in your team and just watch him go and be that kind of flair player, he's just an exciting player to own. Fraser, if he's still in there, at 5.5, but we're looking here at Bruno Guimaraes, 6 million, really made an impact since joining. You can see 67 points in half a season there. So you can double that and you're looking at 120, 130 points in a full season at 6 million. When he came to the Premier League, he was deemed to be like a defensive midfielder, but it looks like he's been given the license to go forward. So again, if you're playing a 3 or 4 man midfield and you're looking for that 3rd or 4th man, that last piece of the midfield puzzle, for 6 million, I think is a great choice. And again, look at the fixtures for 6 million. If you've got if you're playing a 4-4-2 and you've got Bruno is your 4th midfielder and you've got a benched 4.5 million defender at, say, Arsenal, when he's against City and Liverpool, if you don't believe he's going to have those opportunities, 6 million, it's weird. I don't feel comfortable benching a 5 million defender, but for one game week, say at home to City or away to Liverpool, where those teams are going to dominate Newcastle, benching for the 4.5 million and play a 5-3-2. And for me, benching a 6 million midfielder, I think is okay for a week where maybe, Arsenal are playing a newly promoted side, just as an example. And going up to their strikers, I've got Gabriel Jesus at the moment. I did originally start with Wilson, and I think he is sublime. He would be something ridiculous, like a 200 point plus player, if he got a full season under his belt. The issue is the if. We know his quality, he's the talisman, he's a penalty taker at Newcastle. We know he is a clinical finisher. His issue is staying injury free. If he can get a full season under his belt, he is almost around a 200 point player for 7.5 million. So if you're looking for that partner for Haaland, again, the opening 3 fixtures, he starts at Nottingham Forest. Brighton away is not easy, and City at home obviously is more difficult. So when I'm looking at Newcastle assets, I'm looking at them defensively because I can rotate them. If I'm paying 7.5 million for a striker, I don't want to bench him, and I don't have anyone I want to rotate with because I don't want to bench him. And the issue I find with that is Nottingham Forest at home for your opening game. Excellent. You literally can't get better than that for a game week 1 fixture. But Brighton away, defensively, they're usually really solid. And then City at home, you don't want that for your first 3 game weeks. But if you believe in him and if he can stay fit, I think he is fantastic. So I'm going to give Newcastle, I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10 for this one. They've finished the season really well. They look really good under Eddie Howe. Put in investments into the first team squad. Obviously, they're like the richest club in the world. But you've got defenders that are 4.5 million that you can rotate who have really good fixtures. You've got specifically two really well-priced midfielders that you can rotate out if you want, but 2 good quality players in Bruno and Saint-Maximin. And then up front, you've got a clinical talisman penalty taking striker, and all of those with fixtures that you can see. Apart from City and Liverpool in 3 and 5, the first 10 game weeks are pretty solid for the Magpies. Moving on to the South Coast, I'm looking at Southampton here, and honestly, there's not a lot that I'm liking here with the Saints. Goalkeeper wise, we're not too sure who's nailed anymore. They've got 4 goalkeepers. Looks like it's between McCarthy and Bazunu. We're looking at their fixtures: Spurs, Leicester United, Chelsea in the opening 5. You don't want to start a season with fixtures like that. So defensive assets, Walker-Peters, 4.5 million now, not too bad. Salisu, 4.5 million. You can get a defender for 4.5 million. Again, the options and fixtures for teams like Newcastle, Brighton, Arsenal out there, you can get 4.5 million defenders from there. Why are you going to get a 4.5 million Southampton defender where they haven't really, Southampton as a team haven't really shown us anything to push us towards investing in their squad. Going into midfield, you've got Mr. Reliable. He ticks over year on year. People just don't bring him in. Look at this. 156, 159 the last 2 seasons. 6.5 million. But again, you can go for a forward for United in Rashford if he plays, or stretch out to a 7.5 Sancho, or a 6.5 Saint-Maximin, or 6 million Bruno to start the season with. He's someone you could bring in from game week 6 later on, when maybe you lose patience in Saint-Maximin wasting the ball, or Rashford doesn't stay in the starting 11 for Manchester United. But to start the season with, no. Even though he ticks along, we know he's an absolute masterclass set-piece taker, but just that's not enough to get into your starting 11 or even into your squad, in my opinion. And then up front, you've got Adams at 6.5 and Armstrong at 5.5. So the only interesting thing here is Armstrong at 5.5. If he's in the starting 11, obviously that would be great value. People looking at Undav at Brighton, but I think he's the one that could... We know he's going to get minutes because Broyer's not there to take them away anymore. If they're going to start 2 up front, it's probably going to be Adams and Armstrong. So for 5.5 million, he might be the way to go if you want a super cheap... maybe playing a 1 striker in Haaland and you want a forward on the bench for as cheap as possible who's going to get you quite a few minutes. That's stretching. And again, like I keep saying, the first 5 fixtures are just not good for Southampton. So I'm actually going to give these guys a 3 out of 10. They're relegation-esque quality in terms of the fixtures aren't great. They've not particularly added great quality to their squad at the moment. Not invested in a squad in a while. Things were a little bit stale down there. It's just no one pops out that screams FPL points at Southampton. Now moving on to Spurs, and this one is probably the most difficult one because if anything, I think it's the only team that is arguably overpriced. Now, you've got Manchester City and Liverpool who are clear top 2. Then you've got Chelsea who were pretty on their own in the 3rd place. And then there was a fight for Champions League football between Spurs and Arsenal. Went down to the wire. And the thing is, Arsenal now this season has fallen on the side of being well priced with 4.5 million defenders, 5 million goalkeeper, 8 million key midfielder in Saka, 8 million key striker in Jesus. But then Spurs have fallen onto the opposite side here of not necessarily talking about the big players, Son and Kane, but talking about the rest of the players being slightly overpriced. So let's start with goalkeeper. You've got Hugo Lloris, 158 points, fantastic, 16 clean sheets. But he's 5.5 million, which means he's the exact same price as Alisson and Edison. You're not going to choose Lloris over those 2. The only possible explanation you would choose that is that you think Spurs are going to improve and you've already got 3 Liverpool and 3 City in your team. And then you've got Mendy at 5 million, who's 0.5 million cheaper and arguably plays for, dare I say, a better team. Now, again, if you think that Spurs are going to improve and they're going to get better and Lloris is going to get better, then 5.5 million, fine. It's not an awful price. But I just feel that a 5 million Mendy, all those 4.5 million options, or for the same price, you can get a Liverpool or Man City goalkeeper, and they keep the most clean sheets. He should have been 5 million, in my opinion. Going into the midfield, again, at Arsenal, the 5th place team, you 4.5 million Tomiyasu, Ben White, whoever's going to start at centre-back, right? But here you've got Dyer at 5 million, Davis at 5 million. They're basically, if you want a starting Spurs defender, it's 5 million. So again, it's 0.5 million more expensive than all the other rivals. They're basically priced the same as Chelsea. Maybe it's because they got Champions League football. Spurs opening fixtures aren't that bad. Southampton at home in the opening game week is great, but then Chelsea away, not ideal. Now, of course, the key one here for 5.5 million is new signing Perisic, wing back. Conte's worked with him before. He is, I think, right as of recording right now, the 3rd most highest owned defender behind Cancelo and Trent Alexander-Arnold. If you put his previous seasons on record, a couple of seasons he's played at wing back, but if you put them into fantasy FPL points, he would be incredible value at 5.5 million. But again, 5 substitutions, and I know that they look like they're actively trying to sell Reguilon, because right now they've got Reguilon and they've got Sessegnon on the left side, and they've got Doherty, and they've got Emerson Royale on the right side. So they've got so many wing backs. Until they've sold them, there's still going to be that rotation risk. And the fact that he is aging, and historically he has been substituted. Now, this is a double-sided coin, because on one side, it gets to 65 minutes. It's Spurs haven't conceded. Perisic goes off. Clean sheet locked in the bank. Great. So you're paying 5.5 million for clean sheet points if he doesn't get a goal or assist. But point to point, it's 5.5 million for a clean sheet and 60 minutes, not bad for a day's work. But he has also been subbed a lot before 60 minutes. And that is something that I think it feels as though some weeks he's going to get you 6 to 10 points, maybe even more. So he's got a great ceiling. But I think a lot of owners are going to be consistently irritated and unhappy with him, because I think he's going to get quite a few one-pointers. Either he doesn't start and he comes on in the 50th minute, or he starts and he goes off in the 50th minute and he just get 1 point, and then he gets you 8 points, but then it's 1.2 points. He's so highly owned, you don't want to start with any issues. But game week 2 against Chelsea away is obviously really difficult. Rotation risks, 5 subs, now the rule in the Premier League. I'm not sold on him at the moment, but I can understand why he's popular. Historically and statistically, he's been so good, but I just think 5.5 million for someone who might get rotated out or subbed pre-60 is something that, again, 5.5 million, there's better assets out there, I think, for that price. Going into midfield, Son, 258 points, incredible player. It's the same price as Kevin De Bruyne. He's 0. The thing is, if he'd have come in at 11, because remember, I know he's got so many points, and I know he's such a good asset, and he was so key to a lot of people. You can see he's over 200 points in the last 2 seasons, but he's gone 9 million to 10 million to 12 million, and that's just put people off. He's still almost 26% owned. Remember that ownership stats right now are skewed because we've only got like 1 million players, whereas, we're looking to top 8 or 9 million players this season. So he's going to look high at the moment. A lot of those are just people who are fans of Son as well, which is fine. He's a great asset. I just think if they would have done him at 11 million, it would have opened the conversation more of pushing people to maybe not go with Haaland and Salah, who are so highly owned, that it would have opened the door. And then you've got Harry Kane. Of course, Son and Kane, you can't talk about one without the other. Then you've got Harry Kane at 11.5 million. Again, it's the same price as Haaland. So you could argue, do I go with a new, spicy, young buck at Man City for 11.5 million? Or do I go for the tried and tested Harry Kane, who actually last year did all right? He's notoriously slow. He usually doesn't score in the first month, but it just feels a little bit too much. They are the 4th side. I know he's just got under 200 points, but just for me, the fixtures aren't that bad apart from that Chelsea fixture, then City in game week 7. They've got, Southampton in game week 1, Wolves, Forest, and Fulham in the opening 6 game weeks. It's so good, but For me, I'm leaning towards Haaland because in game week 2, Bournemouth at home, he's probably going to be my captain. And Son, you can only get 2 premiums. In my opinion, you can get 2 premiums and still have a really good squad. And this is why Salah and Haaland are so highly owned, because they are probably the 2 best choices, which means Son being 12 million and Kane being 11.5 hasn't twisted enough arms for us to not go with them. Kulusevski is another one that, before we got Richarlison, who misses the first game, by the way, but Richarlison as a forward, 8.5 million, and Kulusevski, it looks like these two are going to be battling out, which means Kulusevski before Richarlison was a great price. I think for 8 million, he was going to fight for that 1.8 million slot where there's some good talent. You've got Saka, you've got Mount, you've got Diaz. He would have been right up there fighting for that 8 million slot in your team. Richarlison's just joined. Obviously, it's Kane and Son up front without a shadow of a doubt. So who's the one who's going to be playing more? Kulusevski or Richarlison? Or they're going to share it? Which means, because they're both fighting for that slot, it's a little bit like Smith Rowe or Martinelli at Arsenal, but more expensive. And obviously Richarlison's a forward. None of them are going to be nailed. They're always going to be given opportunities for minutes, which means Kulusevski and Richarlison aren't an option, in my opinion, until we get the season underway. Definitely not for pre-season. The rest of the midfield for Spurs, you're not going to touch. And then forwards, again, because Kane is on his own nailed, Son's your midfielder and Kane is your forward. So for Spurs, this one is more opinion based, so I'm gonna give them a 7 out of 10, but that's dependent on your belief for this team, because if you think they're gonna get better, Conte didn't have preseason with them last season, and apparently he's absolutely cracking the whip this preseason. Harry Kane's been chundering, throwing up everywhere, but for 5 million a Spurs defender, or 4.5 million rotation options at the likes of Arsenal, Brighton, Newcastle, Brentford, etc. Difficult to argue for that 0.5 million more money at Spurs. Just the fact that Son and Kane, if it had been Kane at 11 and Son at 11, or Son at 10.5 even, would have definitely forced people to either have 3 premiums and lower their squad elsewhere. It would have just asked more questions. You've got 2 premium slots, you're probably going Salah and Haaland. But if not, if you're bold, you're gutsy, and you believe Spurs are still, Son and Kane are still going to do the business, they are, of course, fantastic options. But just for me personally, 2 premium slots in my side. I can't look past Salah and Haaland. If some would have been 11 or 10.5, I might have found a way to get 3 of them in, and that would have lowered all my other players. So I wouldn't have had Perisic, I might not even have had Cancelo or Trent. That would have asked a lot more questions, but the fact that they're so highly priced means you're probably not looking too much at Spurs. West Ham United. Goalkeeper, 5 million, Fabianski, you're not going to touch, in my opinion. You got Areola here at 4.5, who could be breathing down his neck. Fabianski's not getting any younger. The main issue with West Ham is they start the season against Manchester City at home. Now, granted, last season, they did a hell of a fight against Manchester City at home. Could be the same again, but let's start with the goalkeeper defenders. The fixtures are really good. They've got Forest, Brighton, Villa in the opening 5 game weeks, but City in game week 1, Spurs in 5, Chelsea in 6. Just, especially if you're going to wildcard and say between game week 8 and game week 10, there's just better options out there. And again, you're going to pay 5 million for Cresswell, Dawson, for Aguerd, the new signing, or you're going to pay 4.5 million for is Kufal going to start right back? We're still not 100% sure. You're not really. You'd pay 5 million if you're going to pay 5 million. You'd pay 5 million for Cash or Dean at Aston Villa, or for a Spurs defense, because Spurs defense is better than the West Ham defense. So you're not looking there. Bowen at 8.5 million. So I said earlier, 8 million has got some tasty options with your Saka and your Mount and your Maddison. But Bowen at 8.5, if you can stretch over 200 points last year, he's had a massive price hike, 6.5 to 8.5. How Bowen can jump 2 million in his price, Trent is the same, is just boggles my mind. The price might put you off. The fact that he's got Man City at home might put you off, but he did the business against West Ham last year. 8.5 million isn't breaking the bank, but again, you're probably looking at Saka, who's key at Arsenal. You're looking at Diaz, who could be in that forward line for Liverpool. It might just be a touch too much. People might start the season with Ben Rama at 6 million. They did last season. He had a wicked start and then just completely tailed off and did nothing. Someone who you might want to look at as a lower price is Fornals, and that is because Lanzini could be on his way out. And if Lanzini goes, that makes Fornals at 5.5 million a much better option. He'll get more minutes there. So if you're not keen on Neto, if Lanzini goes, I think 5.5 million for Fornals could be a sweet differential. If you want to put 5 million on your bench, Rice is going to play 90 minutes pretty much every week and pop up with a goal and assist every now and again. You're probably not looking at that. And then you've got Antonio up front at 7.5 million. He had a good, healthy season. Granted, he looked really tired at times last season. He flew out the gates and then was really dropped off. It was really the opening 5 to 10 game weeks where he got most of these 140 points. Until West Ham go out there and get some players, the same issue they had last year is the squad depth. You know, an injury to Bowen and then Benrahma, Fornals and Antonio become much worse options. You know, Antonio is out. Maybe Bowen pushes forward, which is great for 8.5 million. West Ham need a good summer. That they had Europe last year. They did really well in Europe as well, but we're not seeing any quality additions to push them to the next level to try and fight, say, Arsenal and Spurs to maybe even get into Champions League football. You know, they're solid under the manager with Moyes. The team have played together. They're gelled. So having not too many new signings is good because they're all used to each other. But equally, you want to start to add just 1 or 2 marquee signings to really boost the profile and the quality of the club. And until we see that, I'm going to give West Ham a 6 out of 10, and that's because Fornals is great and Benrahma maybe is okay as your cheaper options. Bowen is class at 8.5 million. It's just a little bit. If he'd have been 8 with Saka and Maddison and Mount and Diaz, that would have turned a lot more heads. But the fact that they've got City in game week 1, he's 0.5 million more expensive than a lot of other options. Antonio didn't do anything in the second half of last season, and there's no real big attacking new signings at West Ham. And you're not going to go defensively because you just go to Chelsea or Spurs for these prices. Just make West Ham not the great team to start the season with. Last up, we have Wolverhampton Wanderers. So starting in goal, Sarr. Leeds and Fulham in the first 2 games. He's great, but again, he's 5 million. He's the same price as Mendy. But if you wanted someone a little bit different, I don't think he's a bad choice. I just think, again, the same argument. You go up to 5.5 million or you'd go down to 4.5 million. I think Sarr at 5 million overpriced. Speaking of overpriced, Connor Cody was a good, solid 4.5 million defender. You're not going to spend 5 million on centre-back Cody. The ones that are turning people's heads are Johnny, and you got Alt-Nouri, the 2 wing-backs. Personally, I'm not too sure because there's competition these with each other, but also with here Semedo. So I just feel like no, defensively. Fixture-wise, I already said when we talked about Sarr, Leeds and Fulham, good. Spurs, not easy. Newcastle, Bournemouth, Southampton. The opening 6 are not bad for Wolves. But when I'm going to talk about the attack, first let's talk about the defense. The numbers are poor. They didn't do particularly great last year. Didn't feel like there was a lot of cohesion. Defensively, okay. Everything was just okay. They were poor in the stats. And when you watched them, it was just like going through the motions. It was like from early in the season, they knew and everyone knew they were just going to finish mid to lower mid-table. Even such a talisman such as Raul Jimenez was getting benched because just things weren't happening. Don't know if it's the tactics or the manager or the players themselves. Just something doesn't sit right with me at Wolves at the minute. And I think there could be, if the newly promoted sides come out of the gates looking hungry and fighting, Wolves could be in a little bit of trouble unless we see some additions. I know that they've just signed, I think, Collins from Burnley. But again, going out there and signing defenders that have just been relegated doesn't scream great things to me. That's just my opinion. But defensively, even though the first 2 fixtures are good, and you can argue the opening sort of 6 to 8 fixtures are pretty good for Wolves, you're not going to pay 5 million. 4.5 million for rotation options. You'd just go to Arsenal or other teams like that you'd rotate with. But if you do want to rotate with them, some 4.5 million options, you probably got Johnny and Alt-Nouri. Watch preseason, see who gets the most minutes, and then that could be your rotation option at the back. Going into midfield, he's everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Here he is, Neto. I don't see it. I really don't. You can see here, I know he had a terrible injury, came back. He got 22 points last season. I don't know why Twitter seems to think this guy is like Messi light, like a beta Messi. I really don't, but 22.3% owned, 5.5 million. He's your 11th man in your starting 11 probably. You've probably thought 5.5 million. He's got some panache and some flair. He's a good player. For me, no, I'd rather go elsewhere for 5.5 million. I'll find an extra 0.5 million and get Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle. People say themselves he had a terrible injury. What's to stop that from coming back? It was a really bad injury. And even when he did come back, he didn't exactly set the team on the world on fire. And again, I said Wolves, attacking-wise, defensive-wise, they're just so meh. They're not showing anything to make me think, yep, Neto's the one for me. But we'll also look at the other midfielders. Gibbs White's back now from his loan spell. Adama Traore, remember, he still plays for Wolves. He only went on loan to Barcelona, but he's back. Podence is back. Hwang is now a midfielder. All of these players are fighting to be in the front line. And I know he's only 5.5 million, so it's low risk, potential good reward, especially with those first two fixtures. Just don't believe in Wolves. I don't think that they've got the quality. And the fact that he's got like 3 or 4 other players fighting to take his position and get benched all the time doesn't feel like it's one for me. Raul Jimenez, though, the Mexican marksman, 7 million. So again, if you're looking for a pair, now if this would have been at the start of last season, 7 million, I would have said fantastic. You know, what a player. You can argue he's not exactly been the same since that horrific head injury that he sustained. 7 million. The only reason why I couldn't really recommend him is because he did find himself out of the team a couple of times, and it wasn't because of injury, it was because of form. And even Wolves fans were sort of saying themselves, yeah, he needs to maybe sit out a game, maybe get some form back or whatever. If he is back in that starting lineup and you want a second striker to go alongside your Haaland, or if you want to go for Darwin Núñez or whoever your second striker is, I wouldn't have him as my one striker, but if you need a backup striker for 7 million, I think he's a good option if he stays in the 11. But Wolves, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10. Decent fixtures, but you really only got Johnny or Al Nouri, but they're both rotation risks. Neto is so popular on Twitter right now, and I don't see it, but for 5.5 million, if they've seen something that I've missed, he could be a good option. Or Jimenez as your backup, your number 2 striker in your front 2 wouldn't be a terrible option. Thanks for watching today's video, guys. That was my assessment of the Premier League clubs and their FPL assets. If you can leave a like and subscribe, that would be fantastic. I know it's a bit of a long one today, but I'm just of the believer that I don't like to do lots of little videos. I'd rather do one big video that you guys can all watch at once or cut it into your own pieces. I'm not someone who likes to do lots of little videos just to get lots of likes and clicks and stuff. So that's just me. If that's something you prefer, let me know in the comments below if you prefer lots of little videos instead of one big one. Also, let me know in the comments below what you think of my assessment. Do you agree or disagree? Which ones do you agree or disagree with? Let me know in the comments below. I do reply to all of the comments. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a good one.